The Constitutional Court has reserved judgment in non-profit organisation My Vote Counts' bid to have political parties reveal their funders. Yesterday, the Constitutional Court held a confirmation hearing over a Western Cape High Court judgment on the constitutionality of the Promotion of Access to Information Act. The hearing relates to access to information on the private funding of political parties. So let's have a conversation now with constitutional law expert Phephelaphi Dube from the Centre for Constitutional Rights. She is also in our parliamentary studios this morning. Good to see you, Phephelaphi. Thanks again for coming in.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So last year, let's just remind our viewers, the court ruled that Parliament must amend the Promotion of Access to Information Act to allow public access to information. How does this fare in terms of the Constitution?
Well, the Western Cape High Court last year took the view that the right to access information as contained in the Promotion of Access to Information Act didn't fully give right to or didn't fully express the right for South Africans to exercise their political votes. And on that basis, the Western Cape High Court found that there was incongruence between the Promotion of Access to Information Act on the one hand, on the other hand, the Constitution providing that South Africans have certain political rights. But then in terms of the Constitution, it's only the Constitutional Court that can confirm the invalidity of a piece of legislation. So which is why My Vote campaign had to approach the Constitutional Court in order for the Constitutional Court to confirm, presumably if that's the way the judgment is going to go, to confirm what the Western Cape High Court has already found.
It's quite interesting when you look at a global perspective. I mean, and I'll just bring the US for an example. You've got the Democrats. They want transparency in party funding, but the Republicans don't. The ANC, they welcome funding transparency, but the DA says it infringes on the privacy rights of the funders. Hence, you know, they'll be targeted for funding a political party. It always seems that the party in power is the one that really doesn't mind if it's out there who funds them, because, you know, they're in favor. But the ones that fund the opposition, then there's a bit of a problem, isn't there?
That's pretty much the argument that the DA had made before the Western Cape High Court. But then the court's response in that regard was that this really wasn't proven and that the DA was really acting on its fears rather than actual facts. But of course, it is on court record that the DA does indeed fear that there can be retaliation for the smaller parties, and just in terms of who funds them.
I mean, what do you make of Chief Justice Mogoeng, however? I mean, saying that the disclosure of party funding will not be helpful unless there is a way to go deeper than the entity that donates.
Well, I mean, of course, it's notoriously difficult to surmise what the outcome of a judgment would be just based on the various questioning by the Chief Justices. But of course, Chief Justice, in raising that point, he does bring about, just a very important point. And I think we perhaps haven't thought through what exactly it means for us to know where exactly the particular funding comes from. But I think on that point, we also need to consider a parallel process that's taking place in Parliament, namely the private funding bill. And in terms of that, all the political parties are going to be required to reveal their sources, well, insofar as individuals donate more than 100,000 Rand. And it also creates a mechanisms for people to still donate anonymously. But in donating anonymously, there will be various checks and balances that are going to be put in place. But importantly, it's going to ban the funding of, well, at least money that comes out of South Africa. So that's going to be no longer allowed, just in terms of private party funding. Yeah.
So just elaborate on that for me a little bit. For funds that come out of South Africa, as in accepting funding from foreign governments, that wouldn't be allowed.
Yes, so either foreign governments or individuals who are based outside, who are ordinarily resident out of South Africa. So that's no longer going to be allowed.
Banned organizations, I know that's also something that's I mean, how do we come up with that? One would think that wouldn't even be allowed. It wouldn't even be something that we need to consider.
Well, absolutely. And I think we also need to look at developments in the rest of the world. And I think South Africa is simply playing catch up, in terms of how, the geopolitical circles in the world are unfolding. And South Africa is, in a sense, catching up and coming to terms with how the rest of the world deals with private political funding. So, of course, in that sense, South Africa is adopting what is currently viewed to be best practice.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about an NGO like My Vote Counts. It's quite incredible that they can bring such an application to the Constitutional Court, and again, what this will do going forward when we have a look at private funding and the information to help voters make more of an informed decision. But let's focus on My Vote Counts, this NGO going to the Constitutional Court.
Well, we also need to bear in mind that the issue of private party funding, My Vote Counts isn't the first organization that has raised this. I think going back as far as 1997, there have been quite a few organizations. I think IDASA famously back in 2003 also had the same challenge, but it's really the first time that there's been this kind of traction. It's really the first time where the courts have found in favor of such organizations. And again, I think it speaks to the robust nature of South Africa's civic society, in that they are very much key to ensuring that South Africa has a robust and functioning democracy.
It certainly is, and it helps the voter, right? I mean, would it help the voter make more of an informed decision? I mean, is this likely to change the political landscape?
Well, it certainly is. And of course, the interesting thing yesterday was that the advocate who was representing the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development also conceded on that point that it is important for voters to know, to have this kind of information in order for them to exercise their political rights. But of course, it was also interesting to note that Chief Justice Mogoeng had questions about how exactly this information would be made known to the South African public. And in a sense, he spoke to the highly unequal nature of South African society, in that he made it quite clear that how you and I as urbanized individuals access information is different from, say, somebody living in rural KwaZulu-Natal. So of course there need to be innovative ways in order to ensure that all South Africans are able to access this kind of information.
Phephelaphi, thank you as always for your views on all of this. Phephelaphi Dube is a constitutional law expert from the Centre for Constitutional Rights, talking to us from our parliamentary studios. And of course, the subject about yesterday's sitting of the Constitutional Court over the privacy of funders to political parties. Let's take a